In the cross, be my glory ever, till my raptured soul shall find rest beyond the river. Amen. Thank you all for such a beautiful reading of the Passion Gospel. That was really very powerful. Thank you. I was on a Zoom call a couple of weeks ago with a group of my clergy colleagues who were talking about Holy Week, the different services, how they prepare, and so on. At one point, someone said, and of course, no one preaches on Palm Sunday. I said, excuse me? Yeah, who preaches on Palm Sunday? I mean, you have the Passion Gospel, and that really speaks for itself. Everyone else agreed, and I thought, well, this is my 27th Palm Sunday since I was ordained, and I've always preached. I never got the memo. So I guess you're getting a bonus sermon this morning.
Yeah, never heard of that.
The other thing my colleagues discussed while I was still digesting the news about preaching was how confusing Palm Sunday is, and how we as clergy have to make it less confusing for our congregations. This day is officially called the Sunday of the Passion / Palm Sunday. And it does merge the story of Jesus entering the holy city of Jerusalem in triumph with the Passion narrative, the account this year from Matthew of Jesus' trial and crucifixion, all into one service. My colleagues on the Zoom call discussed ways to keep them separate. Make sure the music for the Palm Sunday part is distinct from the music for the Passion part, for example. One person even suggested that in order to cut down on the confusion, you should do the entire service as a Palm Sunday service, focusing on the entry into Jerusalem. And then at the very end, after communion, read the Passion Gospel to set up Holy Week. So I sat with all of this for a few days, and I thought, it is confusing, for sure. It's a confusing day. But the confusion is the point. We can't clean up what happens here. What happened to Jesus happened in an atmosphere of upheaval, of turmoil. The only way to understand it is to embrace the confusion. Look at Judas. He's so torn apart. He's absolutely at war with himself. He thinks he knows who Jesus is, but he's more focused on who he wants Jesus to be. He loves the Lord, but he's after a different goal. He even realizes after he betrays his friend that he's made a mistake, and he tries to give the money back. Can't we relate to that confusion? And what about Peter? He promises to stay with Jesus until the end, no matter what. But he can't stick to it. He can't stand up to the circumstances. The disciples have given up their homes and their jobs to be with Jesus because they trust him. They trust his teaching and his leadership. But they lash out in the critical moment, even resorting to violence, cutting off the ear of one of the men who comes to arrest Jesus. They don't understand that he is the Prince of Peace. And then they simply desert him and run away. Even Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, is confused. He doesn't know who Jesus is or how to handle the situation. He's scared, and his wife is scared. What do you want me to do with the one who is called the Messiah? He asks the crowds. It's a chaotic moment. There was general confusion in Jerusalem at the time just about who was in charge, who had authority. Was it the Romans, King Herod, the authorities in the temple? If Jesus was really the king, why would he ride into town on a donkey with a bunch of poor people instead of riding on the best horse in the middle of a big parade of soldiers and the spoils of war? The confusion is the whole point today. Jesus came into the middle of a messy place at a messy time to redeem it, to redeem us. And it wasn't an elegant process. People had preconceived ideas about who the Messiah would be, about who would lead the people to freedom, about who would bring peace and how. Judas, Peter, Pilate, Herod, the high priests, the disciples, the crowds, they all had their own expectations, and none of them were expecting it to end on the cross. What Paul calls folly to the Jews and a stumbling block to the Gentiles. Hearing these stories every year and feeling these feelings of confusion and maybe sadness and anger is important. Through it all, the only thing we can really try to understand today is that the victory of Easter is not possible without the confusing and troubling events of Holy Week. Jesus has to come into the middle of all of the brokenness, the jealousy, the power struggle, the complexity of relationships and expectations, in order to demonstrate the simple power of love and its ability to transform all of these other things. There's no way around it. He has to go through it. There's no way around the confusion in our own lives in 2023. Jesus comes into the middle of it, no matter how messy it is, to be with us. So for today, we can just let it be confusing as we try, like Mary, to trust that God's power is greater than anything else we know.